Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jihan Al-Farra. I'm a journalist at the Middle East Monitor. And today I have with me British journalist and writer Victoria Brittain. Victoria has lived and worked for many years in the US, Africa, and Asia, and she's made many working visits to the Middle East. She was an associate foreign editor of The Guardian for 20 years, and she's also contributed to many specialist magazines in the US and France. She is also the author of many books on Africa and the Middle East. And today we'll be discussing her latest book, Love and Resistance in the Films of Mai Masri. So this is the first book-length study of Mai Masri, who was one of the very first Palestinian filmmakers to document life under Israeli occupation and also the Lebanese civil war. And she's regarded as one of the Arab world's most prominent female film directors. The book covers 3 decades of that May has spent documenting iconic moments in Palestinian and Lebanese linked history. Victoria, first of all, thank you for doing this interview. It's a pleasure to have you with us, as always.
Thank you for inviting me.
So love and resistance, the 2 themes that you highlight in the title give a glimpse into May's work, even for those unfamiliar with her or her films. So why did you decide to write this book, and what made you choose May and her films as the subject of the book?
Well, the book is part of a series of books on Arab filmmakers, and it was my great good luck that the series editors asked me if I would like to do the one on May. And because I already knew May and I'd seen about 4 of her films at this point, which was about 4 years ago, I completely jumped at the idea because I knew enough about the way May worked and how incredibly meticulous her documentaries are, often almost like feature films. And I love the way she uses women so prominently and children. And it fitted in with a lot of work that I've done on children in war and women in war. So it was like a dream project when it came for me.
Yeah, that's obviously I've actually met May a couple of years ago, and in an interview we did with her a couple of years ago in Paris, she said that films were part of safeguarding memory, and you do touch on memory and identity in your book. So how do you think that is reflected in May's work?
Oh, I think memory is absolutely key to the way she approaches almost everything. And I think particularly now, when the attempted erasure of Palestinian identity and Palestine is very much what is going on, to have this historical documentation and to use Palestinian children and women basically as the stars in very complicated historical periods is a way of safeguarding and actually building Palestinian identity. And I think that's one of the reasons why Palestinians identify with May so much, and many people in the Arab world, because they recognize the jewel that is Palestinian identity. And May is putting it out there all the time. I'd actually love you to show the first of our pictures, which dates back to May's early days as a filmmaker.
Yep.
And here she is with her husband, Jean Chamoun, who is a Lebanese film director himself. And this is them working together on a film we might be able to speak a bit about later on, one of the early films done in South Lebanon. And perhaps we should jump from that to 2 other images, which are from a very different period. This is from May's feature film, 2015, called 3000 Nights, which actually opened the London Film Festival here. And the next image we want to show you is the premiere in Paris. And you can see that there's May in the blue top, and with her, the then Palestine ambassador to France, Leila Shahid, and the British film director, Ken Loach, who has written a great endorsement for my book about the importance of May's work and what it shows the outside world. You can see what a happy night it was.
Yeah, and you know, you've just touched on the film in South Lebanon. I watched Frontiers of Dreams and Fears a couple of years ago in Paris during a screening, and I absolutely loved it. I think it may be one of my favorite of May's films. So perhaps you can tell us what's your favorite.
Well, I find it very hard to choose the favorites because I feel I've been living inside these films for the last almost 4 years. And they're kind of, you know, it's like choosing among your children, you love them all. But I do agree that Dreams and Fears Frontiers is a great film. And I'd love to show the 2 images that we have, and then we can talk a bit more about. So this is on the border between Lebanon, South Lebanon and Israel. And it's the day, there was a week when, after the Israeli army withdrew from their 22 years occupying South Lebanon, they just abruptly withdrew. And there was about a week before they organized what was going to be then a huge zone where nobody could go. And Palestinians from all over Lebanon rushed south, and Palestinians from the West Bank all came. And this meeting is between 2 groups of children. Some are from the ones on the right-hand side, as I'm looking at the screen, are from Dheisheh camp outside Bethlehem, and the others are from Shatila camp in Beirut. And May had been working on the third in her trilogy of Children and War, and these 2 kids were linked to each other by letter writing and by a bit of meeting on Skype. And that was the form that a very intimate portrait of adolescent Palestinians separated by quite a short actual physical distance, but enormous differences of life and experience and inability to see each other. Suddenly they could. So there they are on the border. And as several of them said, you know, it was like the best day of my life. And they danced together, they sort of touched, you can see they're touching each other through the fence. And she really captures this unique moment of history, which was the withdrawal of the Israeli army. Can we see the second film, which is on the second, which is also in the film? And this is on the same stretch of barbed wire frontier. And you can see in the background the Israeli watchtower on that side. And this is a brother and sister who hadn't seen each other for 52 years. They were separated in 1948. And I just feel that this picture just completely encapsulates the tragedy and the grief of these people's lives, and obviously so many tens of thousands otherwise. And I think that when you watch the film, the contrast between the exuberant youth and this very, very touching, the way her hand is on the back of his neck, is just, it's so emotional. And I think that part of May's skill is capturing intimate moments like this, which just tell an enormous, enormous story that people don't think about enough. So, you know, all of this is to do with memory. and identity, and all these things I think are encapsulated in different ways in the pictures that we've seen.
Absolutely. And for our viewers who are not aware, this is actually the film was the last of a trilogy she made, you know, of war as experienced by children. And maybe it's got a special place in my heart because I was myself, you know, I experienced, you know, Israeli occupation and the Intifada as a child. But maybe you can tell us a little bit more about children in her films, but also if you have any other favorite films, because obviously, you know, you've been analyzing all of her films, so it's, and as you said, it's difficult to pick and choose.
Well,
So do you have any other favorites?
I have got other favorites. I just want to say something about children. That I think that the film that she made in Nablus during the first Intifada was like the first very successful film that was actually made for British TV,
Yeah.
and it was a way of looking at the Intifada that was completely different from what everybody else was doing, because it was entirely rooted in family life and in children's perception. And I mean, I wish you will be able to watch some of these films if you haven't already watched some of them, because they're so rich in what she shows of a kind of reality that is kind of rubbed out by, you know, the kind of normal TV in and out, quick shots, blah blah, you know, violence on the streets. And May actually says about that film that she knew that she was going to do a film that was completely different from what was on television screens all around. And it is that intimacy and the families and the children that makes it so special and so indelible. But I do want to talk about one other film, which is not so well known, but it's an earlier film, and it's called Wildflowers: Women of South Lebanon. And somehow that whole period of the Israeli occupation, you know, the outside world knew almost nothing about what was going on, and you know, people who really paid attention knew that there was a secret prison with Palestinians and Lebanese fighters in it. But the kind of feeling of what the society was at that time, May's film, this Wildflowers, has 3 iconic women in it. And one of them is Khadija Afifi, who comes up in many of these films. But all 3 of them were imprisoned in Qiyam for different periods of time. Almost all of them had solitary for a long time. All of them had torture as part of everyday life. And the way this film is made, with the 3 women, years later, two of them go back to the prison, and you see them standing in the cell where they were. And there's a terrible phrase that one of them says, you know, I died 1,000 deaths in this cell. Or did she say 100 deaths every day in this cell? And then you see these women with their children, or in one case, in Khadija's case, you see her with her mother back in Shatila. And as the mother just faces the camera with tears running down her cheeks, she talks about having lost her sons one after another. And then her youngest, Khadija, who was then a 17-year-old girl resistance fighter, ends up in Qiyam and she can't see her. So I just think that I love the title, Wildflowers. It just gives you, to have that title in the middle of a war, an occupation story. And also, one of May's great things is her use of archive film. In several of her films, she slices in archive, which, you know, most of us have never seen before. And it's just so, it's so powerful. All of the films are powerful, though, all of them.
Can you read perhaps an excerpt for our viewers from the book.
Okay, I'd like to do that. So I'd like to read a little bit from the conclusion. In a time when news images of Palestinians, increasingly the work of youth, are so ubiquitous and the majority so male and so violent, reflections on May's work are particularly relevant. Her documentaries are set in the desperate struggles of the First and Second Intifada, of Israel's occupation and assaults on Lebanon, among prisoners, refugees, loss and death. But with her focus on the stories of individual children and of women, and her choice of images and of music, May creates out of all this pain a visual poetic canvas showing who Palestinians are. Some words from May. May's confident choice of children and women as the central figures in her films is explained by her own description of her trilogy of the children. This is what she said. These films are the antithesis of the stereotypes that dehumanize and dismiss the Palestinians as a people without legitimate right. The children hold the keys to the contrasting and converging elements of dream and reality. Their little stories of life and love in the midst of destruction and despair, cut through the frontiers separating them from their homeland and from the hearts and minds of people around the world. May constantly explores the relationship between historical memory, imagination, and identity in many of her films. Can I read a little bit more? Have we got to the end?
Yeah, we've got time.
Okay, it's quite short again. There are several unique legacies from May's work in her career so far, and one is her contribution to the flourishing of female talent in Arab filmmaking. Another is the consistency of her attention to beauty and humanity in the work that spanned 3 decades of unforgettable documentation of Israel's wars in Lebanon and Palestine. And third is her contribution to telling a very different kind of war story by using different protagonists, women and children. She draws attention to how, in the many highly commercially successful American films on the Vietnam War, for instance, the stories are those of white American men, and the absence of Vietnamese characters, society, and culture strikes her. Across the decades of May's work and her original commitment to telling the human stories of layers of injustice, destruction, and death has not changed. But with her move into fiction with 3,000 Nights, her imagination was able to deepen the emotional impact of her work. And by using only Palestinian actors, including those playing the parts of Israelis, she emphasizes the artistic strength of Palestinians with memorable power. In the scenes of torture and their counterpart of the scenes of hunger strikes, she has the experience of incarceration running as a thread through her work. Incarceration is central to Palestinian consciousness throughout the generations of the last 100 years, and she's given its true value to Palestinians, women, children, and men as everyone lives it. So that's almost
Beautiful.
the end of the book.
Can you tell our viewers actually where they can get a copy of the book if they are interested?
Well, you can get it from Amazon if you're not boycotting Amazon, as some do. But you can also order it from almost all bookshops, or you can go directly to the website of the publisher, which is Palgrave Macmillan, and you can get it there. Or hopefully, if you're at a university, you can get your university to get it, and everybody can read it in the university library.
Well, I'll make sure to add a link so that people can perhaps order the book from there. But I guess my last question to you is, what was the biggest challenge for you writing this book?
Well, it was the huge challenge of, can I, as an outsider, really tell this story and May's story in a way that does justice to her? And I had so much help from so many different Palestinians and Lebanese. And the fact that the book contains photographs and paintings and poetry that were given to me by people who believed in the book, Palestinians and Lebanese who believed in the book, made me feel that, you know, maybe I hadn't met my challenge, but it was a very, very big challenge, I must say.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Well, just that it's been, in a way, the richest concentrated 4 years of my life. And I've been on such a wonderful learning curve, not only in, you know, what happened. I'm a journalist, you know, that's what I do, but in the appreciation of beauty and love as such a fundamental part of your society. And lucky me, I feel that I've experienced this.
Well, thank you very much, Victoria, not only for writing the book, but also for this lovely conversation. And thank you to our audience. Stay tuned for another MEMO conversation next week on Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Jehan.